UFC San Antonio betting and DraftKings show. We have 13 fights this Saturday afternoon. We got a lot of matchups that are supposed to end early. I'm expecting some violence, all that, and then more on today's show. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. Kicking things off in the women's bantamweight division, we have Haley Cohen, a -115 slight favorite. The comeback on Tamaris Videl is -105. Haley Cohen was booked to fight Eileen Perez just 3 or 4 weeks ago. She ended up pulling out of the fight, I believe, on fight day due to a ruptured ovarian cyst. So obviously pretty unfortunate for her there. But now she gets rebooked against Tamaris Videl in what should actually be, in theory, a better matchup for her. Haley Cohen's a former Dana White Contender Series fighter. We have a few of those this weekend, but she's really, she comes from a very exceptional athletic background. She was an All-American gymnast in tumbling. She's very physical, very strong, but her skill set is still pretty raw, and she doesn't do a ton. She's not putting a ton of volume out there. She does have some powerful kicks on the feet, but she's really looking to just get into the clinch, bully you in the clinch, control you against the fence, and maybe land a takedown here or there. Her top game is not terrible, but she's just not a very good grappler in general, so she can be reversed, she can be submitted, and that's what we've seen her be submitted twice in her career. She was also nearly submitted on that Contender Series fight, so I don't really trust her in terms of those grappling exchanges. Now, on the feet, Videl does have some power. She's really a low-level fighter, though, 6-1, fights out of the Brazilian regional scene, does have 2 wins over former UFC fighters, one of them being Eileen Perez, who was originally scheduled to face Cohen, but that was due to a DQ, and Perez was kind of dominating her, taking her down multiple times, riding out top position. I think Videl is more likely in this matchup to spend time on her back, try to play guard a little bit, but it's hard to just really put much faith in Cohen not to get stuck in some sort of bad grappling exchange, because I actually think even though Videl is a poor grappler positionally, she's a much better submission grappler than Haley Cohen, and that is historically the way you take advantage of Cohen. So this is one where I think Cohen's probably the better minute winner with the control and maybe more likely to end in top position. But Videl, I think, has more finishing ability and probably has the bigger moments. So in terms of the money line, it's not one that I'm going to get involved in. The official pick is going to be Cohen by decision. And in terms of DraftKings, I just think there's much better fights to target on this card. Next up in the flyweight division, we have a banger matchup between 2 former Dana White Contender Series fighters. This one's lined as a pick'em with Venetia Salvador going up against Victor Altamirano. Salvador fought on this past season of Dana White Contender Series. Altamirano was 2 seasons ago. And we know kind of what to expect from both of these fighters. Salvador is historically a finish or bust type of fighter. Of his 18 professional fights, only 1 has gone the distance. Historically, he has very early knockout power. That's the one thing he has is big power. He's big for the division. He's got powerful hooks. He's going to look to get you out of there. But when he doesn't get that early finish, you see the holes in his game start to materialize. He's very hittable on the feet. He does have an issue with the cardio as well. He tends to slow down. And even though I believe he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we've seen him out-grappled, taken down, and controlled on the regional scene by guys that, quite frankly, weren't that good of grapplers. So there's definite holes in his game. And the last thing I'll say about him is he's been finished in 3 of his 4 professional losses. So if he doesn't get that early finish, he is very risky and live to get finished himself. On the flip side, Altamirano, if I thought this guy was anything decent, I feel like I'd be betting him pretty big in this spot. And the reason why I'm not, and I'd prefer to look for a live betting angle on Altamirano, is because I think defensively, there's issues everywhere. I mean, he's a guy he's basically a budget Brandon Royval. He's going to look to move forward, land a bunch of volume. He's spamming kicks. He's got solid body kicks, but his striking defense is pretty much non-existent. He fights with his hands down, eats a lot of shots. We saw him get dropped against Daniel De Silva in his last fight, and he fought through it, overcome the adversity, and end up getting a finish himself. That's kind of what I see happening here, is either Salvador's going to knock him out early, or we're really going to start to see the tides turn in Altamirano's favor, because the one thing that he does have is good cardio. We've seen him multiple times now where he's able to mix in the takedowns, keep up that pace, and win the final rounds to where he can get his hand raised. And I just think that's probably what happens here. I think Salvador has a good chance because of the liability in the striking defense. He's got a good chance to clip him early and maybe get him out of there. But if that doesn't happen, I think Altamirano takes over late. Regardless, I think it's a good fight to target on DraftKings. I think it's going to have a high pace and a high chance to finish as well. So I'm going to have exposure to both sides this week. Next fight up, we have Manuel Torres, a -145 favorite. The comeback on Trey Ogden is +125. And this is another exciting matchup. Torres, another Contender Series alumni, and he's another one of those guys who is basically round one finish or bust. And that's kind of the theme of this card. We have so many matchups where if the guy wins, he's going to score really, really well on DraftKings, but there is significant risk if that early finish doesn't materialize. And I think Torres fits that mold as well. Historically, he is a round one or bust type of fighter. The majority of his wins come inside the first round, and it's because of his hellacious pace. He's very aggressive. He's very powerful as well. He does have like 6 submission victories on his record too, but most of them came against bum grapplers, and a few of those where he hurt them on the feet and then just snatched up the neck. I don't really give him much submission victory upside in this spot against Trey Ogden. I actually think Ogden's the better submission grappler. Where Ogden, I think, is going to struggle is in the physicality department, because Torres is going to be aggressive. He's going to have a power advantage. He's going to have the striking advantage. So I think there's actually a pretty good chance that Torres just steamrolls Ogden early in this fight, and that is going to be my official pick, is Torres by knockout. However, this is another potential live betting spot on the Ogden side, because time and time again, we've seen Torres slow down even towards the end of the first round. If this fight somehow gets extended and Ogden stays alive, and by the way, Ogden's never been knocked out in his career. Typically, he loses by submission. Not that that's impossible here, but he does seem pretty durable. So if he's able to survive around here, this is another one where the tides are probably going to start to turn in his favor. If Torres gasses out badly, then Ogden should be able to land takedowns and pretty much do whatever he wants to Torres on the mat once he's tired. So the pick is going to be Torres. I think Torres has more upside in terms of the round one finishing ability, but keep an eye out for Ogden if he's alive after 5 minutes here. It's another good fight to target on DraftKings as well. And keeping up with the theme of this card, we have another flyweight matchup that is expected to end early, and it's CJ Vergara, a -240 favorite. The comeback on Daniel De Silva is +200, and Daniel De Silva is a guy who's 0-3 in the UFC, but he's been exciting every single time we've seen him, because he is basically, I refer to him as the budget version of Terrence McKinney, but without the ability to land takedowns, because he's a guy that's going to move forward, throw everything in the kitchen sink at you. He's very explosive, very fast and powerful, but really just has 3 minutes of cardio. And if you can get through that initial burst, I mentioned the Victor Altamirano fight because that was basically Daniel De Silva to a T. He rocked him early. He almost finished him early. And then once he couldn't do that, he just melted. And that's basically the story of his career, is he does have big upside if he can get you out of there inside 2 or 3 minutes. But outside of that, and I think the more likely outcome in this fight is CJ Vergara is able to stay safe, avoid getting submitted, avoid getting hurt on the feet, and really start to take over after the initial burst of De Silva here. De Silva's been finished in all 3 of those UFC fights inside of 6 minutes. So again, this is another great fight to target. I like the Vergara side. I think he gets a finish on Saturday. Next fight up in the welterweight division. This is my first bet of the card. I have 2 units on Preston Parsons at -105. It's currently a pick'em between Trevin, Giles, and Preston Parsons. The reason why I like the Parsons side here is because historically I've never been a Trevin Giles guy. He's very low volume on the feet. He is actually a good boxer. Like when he lets his hands go, he's very fast. He's got a strong, quick jab that he typically lands really well. He just doesn't do it enough. He doesn't do enough on the feet. He doesn't mix in the grappling enough as well. Only averages around 1 takedown per 15 minutes. So I just don't trust Giles, man. He's super low output. And even in those low output fights where the pace isn't even super high, he's still gassing in those fights as well. So I can't trust the output and I can't trust the cardio. Now on the Preston Parsons side, those are things I think I could count on. I expect him to be the much more active fighter of the two. His work rate is much higher. I expect the cardio to be there as well. He's coming off basically a career best performance against Evan Elder. And not that I think Elder is comparable to Giles. I think Giles is more skilled, but I think Preston Parsons can do a lot of what he did in that fight. Maybe not look as dominant as he did, but I think he can mix in the takedowns here. And I think just being the more active fighter on the feet as well, along with the ability to land takedowns and control the grappling, and have the better cardio. I think this is Preston Parsons. I know Giles is from Texas. We got to worry about the judges a little bit. That's fine. I'm still riding with Preston Parsons, who I think is clearly improving, whereas Giles is kind of stagnant, and I never rated him that highly to begin with. So give me Preston Parsons by submission. That's the official pick. And next fight up, we have Steven Peterson, a -150 favorite. The comeback on Lucas Alexander is +125. And we've seen some significant line movement in favor of the underdog here. And I'm kind of confused as to why. And there's a couple of those lines this week where I'm kind of scratching my head. I think this is one of them because Steven Peterson is really never somebody that you want to lay big chalk on. So in a sense, I do understand it, but this is a really good stylistic matchup for him against Lucas Alexander, who I think is basically a bum. He's a 7-3 prospect fighting out of Brazil. He's got multiple knockouts, but most of them came against low-level regional talent, and he's been submitted in all 3 of his professional losses. I don't think he can grapple at all. I don't even really think he's a great striker. On the Peterson side, at least I know he's going to move forward, land shots. His striking defense is kind of iffy at times, but he's going to be the much more active striker of the two. I think he can land takedowns if he wants to. He's a guy who basically goes for submissions over positions. I think he could potentially jump on a guillotine here. It wouldn't surprise me one bit. I think he has all the grappling upside, and I actually favor him in terms of the winning minutes on the feet as well. So give me Steven Peterson by submission. I think he gets it done this weekend. And next fight up, we have Tucker Lutz coming in as a sizable favorite at -285. The comeback on Daniel Pineda is +245. And I know it's a big price tag to pay on a guy like Tucker Lutz, but I do think it's somewhat warranted here because Lutz is a guy who I think is just a really solid, well-rounded prospect. He's got a decent pace on the feet, not a bad striker, has a little bit of pop in his punches as well. But when he's at his best is when he's mixing in the grappling. He averages around 2 takedowns per 15 minutes. 8 of his 12 wins have come inside the distance, so he does have finishing upside as well, despite his last couple fights ending in a decision. And on the Pineda side, I just don't see how you could put really any confidence in this guy. He's coming off nearly a 2-year layoff, and the last time we saw him, he was getting absolutely torched by Andre Fili. Fili looked excellent in that fight, ended up being a no contest due to the eye gouge, but Fili was well on his way to getting Pineda out of there, and I think Pineda just took the easy way out. But regardless, that wasn't a good performance, and really his last couple, he's kind of looked like a shell of himself. This is a guy that previously fought in PFL, got busted for steroids as well, and just hasn't looked like the same fighter. And the durability is a major concern. He's been knocked out 3 times in his career. He's been submitted 6 times in his career as well. I think Lutz has all the finishing potential here. And I think as the fight goes on, assuming he can stay safe early while Pineda is still a little bit dangerous, then I think Lutz is going to take over and eventually get him out of there. We're going Lutz by TKO. That's the official pick. And next fight up, you know, I teased it earlier. There's been some line movement that kind of confused me this week. This is that other fight because Chitty Chitty Bang Bang Njokuani was previously like a -185 favorite here. And now, at least on one of the sharper books, he's down to like -145, which is kind of surprising to me because I actually think this is a good matchup for him. I get why people are concerned with him at a chalk price tag because historically, you know, he's been finishing 7 of his 8 professional losses. He does have some cardio issues as well. He slows down as the fight goes on. But I think he might actually have the better cardio in this spot, and that's where there's kind of room for debate here against Albert Duraev. Duraev's a guy who I think I rate much lower than the market does. Duraev is another Contender Series fighter like Njokuani. They both fought on Contender Series. Duraev submitted a bum on Contenders, got the contract, fought Roman Kopylov at UFC 269. I was live at that fight in Fight Island, and I really just was not impressed with Duraev whatsoever. He's billed as more of a strong grappler, but he was only 1 of 9 against Roman Kopylov there, and he got absolutely lit up on the feet, was knocked down. He's got cardio issues. He's been knocked out 4 times in his career. He's got durability issues as well, and I don't even think he can really do that one thing that he needs to do here is land takedowns and dominate the grappling. I'm not even convinced he can do that, and I think on the feet, this is all Njokuani. He's very powerful. He's got 14 of his 22 wins coming by knockout. He was lighting up Gregory Rodriguez. I know he ended up getting knocked out in that spot, but most other fighters would have been knocked out and finished in that spot. And I just think he torches Duraev on the feet, a guy that's super hittable, that has durability issues, and I don't trust him to be able to get this fight to the ground where he needs to, and at least be able to do that at a sustained pace over 15 minutes if the fight gets extended. So I think Njokuani, even though he has cardio concerns, I think they're just as bad, if not worse, on the Duraev side. And then all of the striking and finishing upside on the feet is in favor of Njokuani. So we're going Njokuani by knockout. That's the official pick, and this is another great fight to target on DraftKings. And next fight up to kick off the main card, we are blessed with another really fun flyweight matchup here as Manel Kapp comes in as a -175 favorite with Alex Perez making his return on the comeback at +150. And this is a really great matchup because on one hand, we have Manel Kapp, who's a very explosive athlete. He's got power on the feet. He holds a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. The one real gripe I have with Kapp, and I think Kapp is a future, at least contender in this division. I'm not quite sure if he's there yet, but I do think he is a good fighter. The one gripe I have with him is the output, because at times, you know, he lets his opponents dictate the dance. And additionally, when he is taken down, we've seen him get controlled potentially. He's willing to play guard a little bit, things that I don't think are great in terms of a win-it-minning standpoint. And we saw him pay the price against Matheus Nicolai because of that not enough output, and was taken down multiple times in that fight. I think Alex Perez can pose some of those threats for him. Perez comes from the collegiate wrestling background. He averages a few takedowns per 15 minutes. He's a guy who is going to be working a lot more than Manel Kapp here. He fights at a much higher pace. He throws more volume out there as well. Why I can't like slam dunk Perez here as an underdog is because the dude's fight IQ is pretty bad. And we've seen him time and time again burn us, because even though he's landing multiple takedowns and pushing the pace, I don't really trust his durability, and I don't trust his fight IQ. He's been knocked out in the first round before. We know he's been submitted in the first round as well. Most recently as his last fight against Alexander Pantoja, who basically just dog walked him and then took him down and took his back, submitted him in the first round. So I think there's probably more finishing potential on the Kapp side, but I still like the round winning potential of Perez. If he doesn't do something stupid here, I think he can absolutely implement the blueprint that is be more active than Kapp, take him down, control him on the mat. I think though that's the way you can beat him. I think Perez has the skills to do that. I'm not quite sure if I trust him to, and that's why I'm not sure if I'm going to get to a bet or not, but I am leaning on the Perez side. Perez by decision is going to be the official pick. And next up, we have Macy Barber, a -260 favorite with Andrea Lee on the comeback at +220. And this is another dog spot that I'm interested in this week. I think Andrea Lee, I've always kind of been a little bit higher on in terms of where the market views her, but also I just think this is not a terrible matchup for her, and this is a big price tag to pay against Macy Barber, who I know burst onto the UFC with 4 straight knockout victories, but a lot of those matchups, she was just overwhelmingly more physical than her opponents. Fighters like JJ Aldrich, Jillian Robertson, like those are fighters that are just not going to be able to compete in the clinch with her and really can't take those big elbows and that big power. Now, since the ACL surgery after the Modafferi fight, it seems like Barber has kind of refined her approach a little bit. She's sort of turned into like a point kickboxer, really just a technical boxer, and she's not putting a ton of volume out there. She's not looking to get too aggressive the times where she would early. We only see that in spurts from her now, and we really haven't seen much of it recently. And so in terms of the output here, I think Andrea Lee is going to be the more active fighter on the feet. Andrea Lee's a great boxer in her own right, and she's going to be throwing more volume out there. She's got a good jab as well. And then in terms of the grappling, I actually think Andrea Lee's a better submission grappler than Macy Barber, but where the concern is Andrea Lee has never been able to stuff takedowns. She defends takedowns at just over 50% in the UFC. We've seen her pay the price time and time again with that. Multiple fights where it came down to just her being taken down ended up being the difference here. But I don't really trust Macy Barber to come in here with this massive wrestling game plan. We just haven't seen it from her recently, or really at all. And so that's the only way that I think Barber can cover this price tag, is land repeated takedowns, be heavy in top position, land some vicious elbows with ground and pound. And she's going to have to prove it to me at this price, because I think outside of getting taken down here, I think Andrea Lee has multiple advantages in this spot. So I'm going to be backing Andrea Lee in some way, shape, or form. I think she's a solid underdog target on DraftKings as well. So we're going Lee by decision. That's the official pick. Next fight up, we have Nate Landwehr, a -205 favorite with the comeback on Austin Lingo at +175. And this is yet another banger matchup, and I think I love this fight in terms of DraftKings potential because I expect it to be fought at a high pace here. We know what to expect with a guy like Nate Landwehr, who just wants to move forward, put on a show for the fans, and land in high volume. We've also seen him be able to mix in the wrestling if he needs to at times. Now, I'm not expecting him to do that here, but I just think in terms of how he can win this fight, I think he can win it on the mat. I think he can win it on the feet. I expect him to have better cardio than Austin Lingo. I expect him to throw more volume than Lingo and be a little bit faster than Lingo as well. Now, I do think this fight probably plays out a little bit more competitively than it's lined because Austin Lingo is a guy who does have power in his punches as well. He's not going to put as much volume out there as Landwehr, but I do expect him to be competitive in the striking. So again, this is a great fight to target on DraftKings. I think it's going to be at a high pace. I think there's potential for knockdowns or even a knockout, really on either side. But the official pick is going to be Nate Landwehr. I like both sides in terms of DraftKings. Which brings us to the co-main event that nobody asked for. It's Holly Holm, a minus 250 favorite. The comeback on Yana Santos is plus 210. And this is one kind of similar to the opening fight on the card. I just have zero interest in terms of DraftKings because I don't think there's really a ceiling performance on either side, especially relative to this slate. This is a very good slate in terms of upside on DraftKings, and there just isn't that in this fight. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it here. Holly Holm is almost 42 years old. She just signed a 6-fight deal. So apparently she's going to be fighting till she's like 50. Regardless, I think it's pretty clear she's on the decline, doesn't belong at the top of the division, but neither does Yana Santos here. And I think in terms of the physicality, it is going to be advantage to the older Holly Holm, who is capable of just holding Yana up against the fence, controlling her against the cage. She has been able to land takedowns in the past, but she doesn't do it at a high rate outside of that Irene Aldana performance. I just don't think this is going to be one where there's multiple takedown upside, high volume on either side, really. I think Holm wins. It's going to be by a boring decision. So in terms of DraftKings, I'm not going to have any exposure to this fight. Which brings us to the main event. And this one, I want to say that I'm torn because I love both of these guys, but I'm really not torn because I got to go with my guy Corey Sandhagen here. He's probably my favorite fighter in the UFC, but I also think just from a skill set standpoint, I think this is actually a pretty good matchup for him because we know he's a guy that we can count on in terms of the output. He's got great round winning ability, something that I bank on in a lot of these type of matchups. And I think he would have the more finishing potential as well. Chito Vera, historically a slow starter, builds into fights, great cardio, which is why he sets up well as a main event fighter. But I just don't think he's going to be able to match the output of Corey Sandhagen here. And where he's benefited in the past, because he has been outstruck in multiple fights on this run that he's been on, where he's benefited is he's gone against guys that really didn't have cast iron durability. And that's one thing that Sandhagen does have. We know he's one of the most durable dudes in the division. I think this actually sets up really similar to the Dominic Cruz fight, which we know Chito Vera was able to win. But take away those big moments from Chito Vera, the knockdowns. He knocked down Dominic Cruz multiple times. Cruz, we know, has durability issues at this stage in his career. Corey Sandhagen doesn't. And I think in terms of round winning ability, I think you got to favor the output of Sandhagen. I think Sandhagen could potentially land a couple takedowns here as well. And like I said, I think he's got the more finishing ability on the feet. So we're going with Sandhagen. The official pick is going to be Corey Sandhagen by decision. I do think it goes 25 minutes. I do think it's a great main event, but the winner's going to be my guy, the Sandman, Corey Sandhagen. And as always, guys, fightnumbers.com. I'll have DraftKings player rankings broken down by salary tier, ownership projections, a couple other things as well. It's all completely free at fightnumbers.com. Appreciate you guys watching. Best of luck, and we'll see you next time.